Business management students, how are you today? It is Tuesday, 3/21, and we are into week 3 of our 12-week course. All right, so this week we're going to be looking at chapter 4. So if you have logged on to Blackboard, you will notice that we are doing one chapter. There are review questions for that chapter and one discussion this week. That again, these discussions are more for you to kind of chime in on the stuff that you've read. And if you want to chime in on anybody else's, it's really a time for you to speak up in class, right? In lieu of us being in a classroom where you get to share your ideas in class and comment on other students and kind of have discussions with other students. This is kind of a peer forum that I pose questions that I think will kind of like get you thinking, right? And maybe other students then can chime in as to your thoughts. Again, we want to be inclusive, right? And respectful with our language if we're chiming in on anyone else's post on the discussion board. So this week, I'll just start with this week's discussion post is, which management scholar matches your viewpoints on the role of management? So this discussion, the stuff that you read last week, talking about different management viewpoints, and which one do you think that you most align with? And like the management style, right? Do you believe in motivation, or do you believe in, different hierarchies? So one of the people you probably were reading and you aligned kind of with their theory, right? There's no wrong answer to this discussion. It's just how you feel, like it's an opinion piece for you to kind of like talk about how you feel. All right. So chapter 4, a little bit different this week, just one chapter. I like this 12-week. I've taught this in the 16-week and the 8-week. The 8-week is a lot of work, I will tell you. Anyone that took it in the 8-week, there's a lot of reading and a lot of material. The 16-week is pretty decent. The 12-week, I feel like it's going to be okay as well. I like that it's a little bit longer than the 8-week. So it might be the happy medium. All right, so this week, there's 6 learning outcomes. Instead of talking about the PowerPoint, I think I'm going to talk more about the chapter. I've gone both ways. I talk about the chapters. I'll talk about the PowerPoint. You can look at the PowerPoint, though. It really just is a review of some of the things that maybe you are interested in the chapter. All right. So chapter 6, external and internal organizational environments and corporate culture. So we're talking about corporate culture this week, looking at what is the external environment, that organizations, where do they play, right, in their industry? What are some of the pressures and some of the opportunities? What are some of the external forces that pressure organizations, right? What are some of the things that they have to deal with from a management standpoint? You're going to learn some of the different types of organizational structures and like the pros and cons, right? Strengths and weaknesses of each type of organizational structure. A lot of you already work places that has a significant setup, right? Organizationally, if you are working for a medium or larger size company, if you work for a place where there's only a few employees, there might not be an elaborate structure, but the larger the company, the more elaborate the structure, right? And you may notice that your company falls into one of the structures that you read about this week. And some there's good. There are pluses and minuses to all different types of structures. Some have more pluses than minuses, right? Some have more minuses than plus. So it just depends, and depends on the industry. All right. So, and then you'll be able to understand and explain how organizations like rise to the occasion, or how do they, how do they meet these external pressures, right? How do they meet these threats that might be out there, right? External pressures. But also, how do they take advantage of opportunities from an external, these opportunities that are arising around them? And let's see. Also, like 5th point from this chapter, identifying a fit between organizational cultures and the external environment. So certain cultures, right, of an organization, whether it be, business or nonprofit, right? But from a structure standpoint, how does it meet the industry needs? So I mentioned that different industries have you will see a typical structure for certain types of industries, right? And maybe you've worked in an industry for a while, so you notice a similar structure at a lot of places that you've worked. So thinking about that, how the structure or the culture basically interacts with the external environment. And last but not least, looking at some environmental trends, demands, and then opportunities as well that face organizations. So when you're looking through this chapter, those are some of the things you'll be thinking about some of the forces that play on an organization. If you've taken Business 101, you'll recognize some of these, right? So a lot of the courses, a lot of the topics we talk about in Business 101, these some of the other classes actually hone in on one of those topics. This is one of those classes, management. We talk about management in Business 101 just briefly, but you'll see some of the forces, economic forces, technological forces, sociological, natural disasters. All of these, you're going to be like, oh yeah, I know about these, right? Government and political forces, right, that come into play when a company is thinking about how it situates itself in that external environment. Let's see, thinking about different industries and what the external environment, how much of a play it has on those organizations, looking at some of the designs and structures. So this one, there's this idea of a matrix structure that is really like was happening in the 60s, 70s, 80s. Now we have like this idea of a virtual structure. And even though this textbook is a little bit, it's pre-COVID, really, when it was written, right? Or when it was mostly written, even though it was, let me see if I can actually find when it was written. Since it's a not atypical text, it's not going to tell us exactly. Nonetheless, I know that this text was written because of the references in the last 5 years, but not post-COVID. It was definitely not written post-COVID. And it talks about the virtual structure, right? So there will be some things in here that are already outdated and some things that you might know as much about, if not more about, because we all work in virtual. We're in a virtual structure right now, right? Higher ed has had to adjust to this virtual structure. And then there's some flow charts as to which you might know these organizations. If you work at Hammond or St. Vincent, you'll know exactly these, how these look. CEO, or the president, and then it trickles on down. Who's next in line, right? The flow chart for that. Let's see, what other, there's a lot of charts in this section that explain, like from an org standpoint, who answers to whom, right? And thinking about then reaction to external environments, right? And how do companies do that from a culture standpoint? So make sure you review some of the shared values. There's a structure in here, example of Amazon with Jeff Bezos and who works underneath him and how that kind of plays out. Looking at this idea of the competing values framework, right? I did a study when I was working on my doctoral coursework that a student friend and myself, we worked on using this CLAN, adhocracy, market, and hierarchy to assess. We did some research to assess a large local organization to figure out how the employees felt and to figure out what was happening in that organization. And it was during COVID, toward the end of COVID, but during COVID, early COVID. So make sure you check that out on page 110, the competing values framework from Cameron and Quinn. And that really is our chapter 4. So make sure that you review those types of things and you think about some of the management styles at your own organizations, or maybe some management or org structures that you've been at before. Maybe you have enough of a reference. You can say, I like this, but I don't like this, right? And so there's also a short video on corporate culture that is under week 3. There are homework questions at, and then there's also this discussion post. Now I'm working to get homework grades up. So if you don't see yours, but you turned it in, don't worry. I'm working to get those up. Hopefully by the end of the day today, we will see, gathering all the homework and kind of reviewing the homework to make sure that it's being completed. And so if you know you're missing any homework though, or missing a past discussion, please get that in as soon as possible so you get credit. All right. And so, yeah, we are in week 3. So hopefully everyone is enjoying the class. As always, you can reach me at crobertson@ec3pa.org. You can always text me and I will get back to you, 814-490-6473. If you want to meet virtually, we can do that. I am on campus Tuesdays and Thursdays, um, and sometimes Wednesdays, but I can be there also and meet with you if you need to. I'm at the West Campus. Um, I will be at the East Campus as well next 8 weeks, so after break. But for now, I am there. If you needed to meet pretty much Monday through Thursday, I can make arrangements, right? So just let me know. Otherwise, have a great week, and I will circle back around with you later in the week to make sure everybody is moving forward. Have a great afternoon.